Mastering your hand movements. On this video, guys, we're going to focus in on building up the muscles in your hand so they start actually doing what you want them to do. People often say to me, what I've got in my head never comes out in my hands, especially in the earlier stages of microblading. And this is due to a lack of practice in building up their hand and muscle memory. So in order for us to get our bodies in better shape, we have to lift weights to build muscle, and we have to do mobility in order for us to achieve good lifts and a better range of motion. And if we continue to do both mobility and lift weights, our bodies will get more sculpted and stronger and move better as a result of this. And the great thing about the body is once it's been trained and once it's been taught, it remembers it, and this is called muscle memory. So if we go off track and then start again, the body shapes up quickly, it starts to get strong again quicker, and it remembers the movements quicker. This, of course, needs to be followed with good nutrition. So let's put this into microblading terms. It pretty much is the same. We need to feed ourselves with the right knowledge and understanding of the strokes, the shapes, the connections, and the bundles first before we get working on building our hand movements and our mobility so that it can visually do what we want it to do. If you want a greater understanding of strokes, connections, and bundles, we've also got a video for this in previous skills videos. So no matter how far down the line we are in our microblading, I definitely feel we should always be working on our hands on latex, as the better we can get it on the pads, the better we're going to get it on people. Do you honestly think that pro boxers don't work on pads in between fights? It's pretty much the same for us. We honestly never want to be getting it wrong on the pads, because if we're getting it wrong on the pads, we're getting it wrong on people's too. I'm looking forward to seeing what you think of this video. I feel it's really going to help you a lot, and yeah, see you soon. Okay guys, before we jump into building up that hand muscle and movement, I just want to chat a little bit about the blade that I'm using, okay? So everything that I'm going to be teaching you is all related to a curved blade. I never ever use a U-blade and I never ever use a slant. So I do feel like you will be able to use your U-blade and try and adapt it the best you can. But if you are using a U-blade or a slant blade, definitely give using a curved blade a go, okay? The beauty of a curved blade is because it's got the shorter back, so I call that the heel, and then the tip, and it's got this sort of curvature in the middle. I definitely think it's got a part to play in being able to get them wispy looking strokes, especially when you're moving through the skin in a pendulum sort of movement. It definitely gives you an advantage there. And definitely you want to be using something that's about 16 pins if you're wanting to start to do things similar to the way we do it, because we do work with a lot of really long strokes. Anything too short just does not work, and you can achieve short, long, and medium strokes with this curved blade at 16 pin, okay? So that's the first thing that I want to talk about. The next thing I want to talk about is the 90 degrees that everyone's always banging on about. Hold your pen at 90 degrees. Yes, you do need to hold your pen at 90 degrees. And what that means is that when your pen is like straight up and down, that your blade is like popping out and giving you that 90 degrees. So when you're doing that, all your pins should be on the pad, okay, or on the surface that you're working on, and the pen should be kind of straight up like that, all right? Now again, position of that is going to change depending on what client you're working on. If you're working on a client that has like a really curved brow bone, you might need to then push that out ever so slightly. So always check your pins against the client you're working on and just reposition it as you go. But we're working on a flat surface today, so that 90 degrees is ideal. Now, the next thing that I want to just chat through is the pendulum movement that we talk about. So what that means is that we're kind of moving through like from the heel of the blade to the middle to the tip, okay? So that's basically that pendulum sort of movement, okay? And we also want to be thinking about light, heavy, light pressure, and that is the key to getting the dual-ended strokes. If we just kind of work on like the tip of the blade, which I see a lot of people doing, we're going to get these little scratchy like looking strokes like that, okay, and they're very blunt at both ends. If we are working with just the heel, we're going to get these sort of wide strokes that just blur out and fuzz out. But then if we're kind of working through the skin with this pendulum movement, kind of rolling the blade, we're definitely going to get these wispier edges on our stroke. Okay, that wasn't the best example, but we'll get there. Okay, so yeah, we're talking about this pendulum movement. We're thinking about light, heavy, light. We're also never wanting to be here as well. Sometimes I see people holding it like a pencil and they're kind of cutting into their microblading skin like so, or on people. And again, they're getting these kind of blurred out looking strokes. So you do want to be 90 degrees. You want to constantly be checking your hand movement, making sure that you're as upright as possible and that you're moving through, thinking about light, heavy, light pressure, and just kind of using that pendulum motion through it. Another thing that I want to suggest to you as well before we move on is like again, how you are actually holding the pen. Sometimes you do see people holding it like a pencil, and when they are, like what I was saying earlier on, you don't get any range of movement. Okay, you're really restricted by having all these fingers tucked in like that. Okay, so you definitely want to be getting these fingers a little bit more freer to allow you to go the distance and allow you to use your wrist and your fingers more. And all your work is really in your wrist and your fingers. You never want to be using your arm. If you're putting your whole arm into it, then you're definitely probably going to be working too heavy in the skin. So to be more graceful and be more delicate, you definitely want to be keeping all the action in your wrist and in your fingers and learning to like being able to twist and turn your fingers like how you want it to be. Okay. So let's just chat through another thing. So now I'm just thinking about moving through the skin in a pendulum movement and just finishing off on the tip, giving me these really nice sort of wispy looking strokes. Like really look at the pace that I'm going at here as well, guys. So the pace is everything. You want to be really working through the skin really slow. It's going to be less dramatic. It's going to be more precise. And it also is going to allow you to be consistent with your pigment. So obviously I'm not using any pigment today, but if you were using pigment and you cut too fast, you're going to be losing a lot of your pigment. And because the pigment's so thin and runny as well, it kind of shrinks back off the blade. So you really want to, when you're using pigment, is have that wee pool of pigment on the skin and just roll it gently through the skin so that you're creating a wee pigment trail, okay? Now, I'm just actually now going to talk about the direction of the S stroke, okay? So when you're doing your S stroke, wherever you're pointing that blade is like absolute key. So on another video, I showed you how a lot of people do their S strokes really curving too soon, and they're curving up and then they're curving away around like that, okay? So because I pointed my blade that way, it's forcing me to do that, okay? If you think about more angling your blade like further pointing down the way, like so, you know, wherever you're going to put that is where it's going to start. So it's like here as opposed to here. Okay, so you never want to be coming out into the curve like that. You want to be thinking about coming out straight into the soft curve and then into your other soft curve. Okay? So that's another thing I want you to think about when you're doing it. So wherever you're pointing that blade, again, if it was an inverted stroke, if you had your blade too far that way, you're going to be forced into making it too overly inverted. Whereas if it was a bit more like this, you'll just get like a better shape on your inverted stroke. And again, your curve. If you were pointing your blade over this way and then try to create a curve, what you're going to get is that being too C-shaped as opposed to going the right way along the bottom, okay? Okay, guys, so now you have all the understanding of what actually goes into, you know, a good stroke, which is the 90 degrees, making sure you're not working with just the tip or the heel, that you're using all pins in the pendulum movement, and that you're not working with the sides of the blade, and you're going at a slow pace, and you're thinking about all the movement your hand is doing is in your wrist and in your fingers, as opposed to totally using your arm again, so that you get the most delicate, like nice looking strokes. So once you've kind of like digested that, what I would suggest doing is going back, start just doing some like work on pads yourself and see like where you have maybe got some bad habits. Really, really have a look at your strokes, like where they can improve. Check your hand position against everything what I had just been suggesting, and then just kind of correct it and readjust it. Once you know all of that, what you want to be doing is absolutely just spending like a week mastering one stroke on the pad. So if it's really the S stroke that you want to work on, what you want to be doing is just like spending your time really practicing them and just doing them and them only. Okay, and again, if it was the curve stroke that you wanted to practice, you would do exactly the same, like so. And of course, I'm right-handed, so the left side for me is definitely a lot easier. So I'm definitely not going to avoid the right. The right should be the one that I should be practicing the most on. When I'm doing the left, I work front on. And when I'm doing the right, the pad changes. Okay, so the pad is going to change a little bit just now. And what I'm doing is kind of working from the side on my client. And I always still want to be pushing the blade away. So as you've seen me doing them there, my blade is always going away from myself. When I pull towards myself, I feel like I close my space up. I can't get moving. And when I'm open on from the other side, when I'm pushing away, I've got more open space that allow me to do it. So you definitely want to be practicing the harder side as well, and just really getting your hand to move the way you want it to move. Spending the time on your most harder side and just work on practicing the S stroke or whatever it is stroke that you're struggling with. Now, another little tip, what you can do on the right side if you're right-handed, on the client's right side, is actually working from the top of the stroke to the bottom of the stroke. Okay, so another little tip I want to give you with the right side is, so often what you'll see is me working from like the bottom of the stroke to the top, like so. What you can also do is actually work from where the stroke ends to where it begins. So say, for example, this was the top line of the brow. You could start your stroke here, and then you could bring your stroke down to the bottom line of the brow there, okay? So you're almost like working back on yourself, but you're still pushing away. Okay, and I feel like you can get some really amazing curves and bends like that. Okay, so there's another little practice tip for you guys. You can also do that on the left side as well. I'm not going to do that just now. Okay, so now that we have spoke about how important it is that we just practice all the different strokes, what we want to do is just get in and just start really practicing our bundles. Okay, so really starting to practice our bundles and connections. So what you want to think about doing is like making the first stroke that you do a little bit heavier than the next one that you put in, okay? You want your second stroke on your bundle to be a little bit lighter and a little bit softer, especially when you're going in to connect it on, because you really don't want to make that too heavy in there. You want to really be able to know when to stop, when to get lighter, and the more you can do it on a practice pad, the more you're going to be able to do that on a person. So really just practicing your bundles, in all different ways is a great practice for your hand. You can also start to practice little crosses. Okay, so if you were doing that and you wanted to give the illusion that the stroke had crossed, you could start and then you could stop when you get quite close, and then you could finish the stroke off and give the illusion of it crossing. Now, if you were doing this on a person and there was pigment involved, when you were doing your connecting stroke, you would probably want to stop at quite a bit of a distance and then finish the stroke off. And then with a dry blade, you could go in and sort of connect them up so that they connected up there. So yeah, building up your hand muscle is exactly what we want you to do for this whole month, really. Just practicing your singles and your bundles and all these wee different styles and shapes of strokes. Another really cool practice to build up your hand muscle is practicing creating little feathers. So like what I was showing you earlier on, we were starting at the top of the stroke down. You could do this, like so. Okay, so we're connecting them all together here. And then from this end, you're maybe going up like this. And you can see I'm not even moving the pad, I'm just moving my wrist so that it's getting used to going in different directions and different bends. And then again, you could go in and practice your bundles onto them too. And then your bundles coming from down like that. And the other way. And just practicing cool little shapes to start to get your hand to build up that muscle memory. So I would recommend doing that. And even if you are advanced, continuing to do that every couple of times a week is definitely going to help you so much better when you're then going to do it on your clients.